Andre, it's great to have you here. My name is Rich Dixon. I'm the Senior Director of Innovative Learning here at Hāpara, and I'm here with my good friend and award-winning educator, Andre Daughty. Andre, welcome.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Andre and I go way back. We've done a lot of work together in project-based learning circles and beyond. And in light of this being February, we wanted to take time to record a discussion that we're going to have around celebrating Black History Month now, kind of the what and the why of it, but also going beyond that and thinking about how we can celebrate folks of color beyond just this month. And for those of you that are in the Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand and Australia in particular, I know that you celebrate Black History Month perhaps a little differently than we do here in North America, specifically the United States and Canada. And you have a different time of year in which you do that. So we do want to acknowledge that ahead of time. And we want to invite you on this journey with us as well. So Andre, tell us a little bit about Black History Month and kind of the why behind it.
Yeah, this is the month that honors excellence through a lens of our Americans who are Black. Just really simple. I think about growing up when I was in elementary school at my local church. Every Black History Month, every February, they made all of the students, all of the youth of the church to do like a book report on somebody notable who was Black. And it couldn't be Martin Luther King Jr. and it couldn't be Rosa Parks. It could be anybody else but those two, because we knew at all of the schools, those two would be the ones that you'd hear about. And so imagine to my surprise, a third grader finding out that some guy named Benjamin Banneker pretty much created all of Washington, D.C. The same Benjamin Banneker who created the almanac. Wait a minute, huh? Time out. You telling me that there's a person in our America who is smart enough to construct DC, like blew my mind. And then sadly, it took me quite a while to get to Washington, D.C. I was in my late 30s the first time I finally got there. But once again, as soon as I stepped down, as soon as I got to the White House, to the National Mall, it hit me. I went all the way back to third grade. And I remember sitting at that desk, reading about Benjamin Banneker, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I started crying, man. This is why it is so important for us to learn about our American history through the lens of a minority, our Black Americans, during the month of February.
I think it's so great. And I love that illustration because I think it's something you and I have talked about, whether it's related to Zaretta Hammond's work or others that have inspired us, specifically around being able to provide examples for students so they themselves can see a model, a role model. And that's a whole nother discussion. And I know that you've been a role model for others, obviously, as a Black educator. For those of us that maybe don't come from that same background, how might we do a better job of teaching about Black history, not only during February, but through the rest of the year? And then how does that extend into folks that maybe aren't Black to other backgrounds and folks of color?
Yeah, if you are an educator and you are anywhere close to Louisiana, Baton Rouge area, Southern University area, you've got to go to the Whitney Plantation. Because once again, this is teaching that American history through a Black lens. I live in Oklahoma, and so the closest spot nationally that everybody may be aware of is Greenwood, Tulsa, right? Where the Gap Band, Charlie Wilson, that is where they called it Black Wall Street, or back in my day, they first called it the Tulsa Riots, Tulsa Race Riots, and then nationally, the language changed to the Tulsa Massacre. But not just here in Oklahoma, in any area of our world, globally, there's some history there that's coming from a Black lens. As a teacher, my advice to you would be go and look and find those local activists, find those local historians and ask them, where is the history of our America through a Black lens? And I can guarantee you that you'll find more than a few stories, man. Like, let me give you an example here. So once again, growing up, same neighborhood, same culture, same community. I think that's also so important. The community to which I live. we were urban. We were on the other side of the railroad tracks. We were hood. We were the black neighborhood. I mean, can't say it any other way. But inside of that area, we had historians who heard the stories from their parents and their parents and their parents' parents. And one of the stories there is that there was this young lady. She was a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Clara Looper. And Mrs. Clara Looper was an educator in the hood in the Oklahoma City area. And there was this young up and coming preacher who had just graduated college, and he was doing like a demonstration of his preaching in Oklahoma City. And so he comes and he preaches, and to the story, he was there maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And while he was there preaching at that church, Miss Clara Looper, the teacher, was there. And Mrs. Clara Looper was doing demonstrations all over the city. She had her students walking inside of these restaurants, sitting down, doing nothing. Just sit. You deserve to be here. And of course, during that time, sit-ins were not a national thing. She's talking to this young preacher about this. This young preacher declines being the pastor at that church, and this young preacher moves on to another church in Atlanta. And that preacher's name was Martin Luther King Jr.
I was going to guess. Wow.
Yeah.
What an amazing story.
So she was there helping him, giving him ideas, mentoring this young dude. And now this dude goes to Atlanta, blows up, become national. This is local Oklahoma history, American history through the lens of a Black person.
I love that
and
example.
This is why it's so important. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I love that because I think it does point to no matter where we are, if you're listening from Canada, if you're watching this again in the US or Australia, New Zealand, or somewhere else, undoubtedly you're going to find some connections to folks that maybe haven't had history highlight their background. And I think one of the things, Andre, that is super exciting is to think about the number of resources that have emerged over time. I know the National Archives, for example, if you Google them, there are some great examples of early Black, not only inventions, but contributions to literature and a number of other leaders that are just oftentimes not highlighted in our textbooks. And so for those that are watching, what are some of the ways in which you would help folks keep this learning going beyond February and perhaps even broaden its reach to those that are people of color, but maybe aren't Black?
Yeah. 365 happens all the time. Learning happens all the time. We as teachers always say we're lifelong learners. Well, just don't start or stop in February. Find out, like one teacher here locally, elementary educator, locally, she found one Hispanic American, one Asian American, one Indigenous American, one Black American. And each month, she made sure that she found at least 12 people. And each month she captured those moments. In the month of March, here's an Asian American who did great things in our America. Here's the Hispanic American who's done great things and each person kept rocking and rolling. By the end of that year, they now know 48 Americans who did contributions for our America. So it wasn't just Black history, it was Hispanic history. It was our Asian history. It was our Indigenous history. I thought that was the coolest thing. And I was begging her, like, please put it on the spreadsheet so we can share this. Like, there are some teachers who can use this. She's a little scared right now and she hasn't shared it, but that idea is still there. And the reason why I loved it the most, inside of that classroom, there were a lot of students who weren't very familiar with any of those cultures or that history. And now they're being exposed, they're becoming aware. They're learning that American history, you got George Washington and you have Abraham Lincoln, but you also have Frederick Douglass. You also have Benjamin Banneker. I thought it was one of the coolest things ever. Yeah.
Such a cool example. Yeah, I really like that. And I want to go back and just emphasize something that you said earlier. I mean, those local examples are really great, being able to connect into national stories like the Martin Luther King story that you told as well. And, just this past weekend, I was hanging out with a friend and he was talking about a student that had come to him that had been kind of passed around to other teachers, had kind of a bad reputation as a student that was often disruptive in a class. But when he got to my friend's classroom, he saw the fact that they had the same background. They're both Black. And the fact that he all of a sudden had somebody that he saw himself in and had a similar background. And all of a sudden, the student's entire world and engagement, and therefore the student learning outcomes, changed and improved significantly because he felt that there was an understanding in a way that maybe hadn't happened before. So how do you encourage folks, especially folks like myself who maybe aren't Black, that maybe have a student that needs to connect? How do we make those bridges so that people understand that regardless of skin color, we're on the same team. We want the same thing as an educator for all of our students, which is for all of them to be successful. So how do we bridge those barriers that we sometimes inherit when a student comes into the classroom?
Man, that is a great question. I was sharing with the friend the other day, and you know the friend, we'll say the friend offline. I was sharing with the friend the other day, this is where the inner work really happens.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we as administrators, we with purpose just want to bring a teacher to the school. And sometimes those teachers do not reflect the students we serve. And so we ask ourselves, well, we didn't know, I pulled out looking for a math teacher, but where did you look? Like, go to an HBCU. You see, I'm wearing one today. Like, did you go to an HBCU teacher fair? There's a lot of HBCUs in our America. How many did you go to recruit teachers to come to your school? Or did you just go where it was easy?
Right. Absolutely.
Like, I mean, that makes a big difference. Here locally, a bigger district here in Oklahoma, they knew that we were getting a lot more of our Hispanic students. And so they knew we need more teachers who can speak Spanish, who understand the culture, who look like the students they serve. And they looked high and low. And what they did, this school district, they realized that it wasn't, the Hispanic language wasn't coming from like Mexico, but more of a Spain in dialect. So they literally went to Spain, pulled out the checkbook and said, we need at least 20 teachers to come and teach in Oklahoma. They ended up getting 21. Now, imagine that school now with 21 new teachers from Spain who can speak Spanish. Imagine our Hispanic Americans who have come and traveled from Mexico, hearing the cultures of Spain, hearing the cultures, hearing the dialect, the Spanish, but they're saying, well, in my España, this, that, and the other. Imagine the Black students who are now hearing and learning about the cultures of Spain, and a lot of them not ever wanting to go. Now, imagine our white students hearing and seeing it. But imagine the difference that community now has with 20 teachers coming from Spain.
Yes, what a big difference. It is just that
important, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that are in Canada, those of you that are in Australia or New Zealand, when we're talking about a historically Black college or HBC, that has played a really important role within our nation's history. And do you want to just briefly touch upon that as well? Because I know that's higher ed, and we're talking about K-12 primarily here. Yeah. But I think there's an important interplay because I think it's inspired a lot of how we think about Black history today.
Absolutely. Basically, there are two different types of colleges in America. You have your historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and then you have your PWIs, predominantly white institutions. So those are your main two. And I'll just share from Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, we have one HBCU, Langston University, built 1897. And then basically in Oklahoma at the time, Indian Territory, a lot of our enslaved people were running away and they fled to Oklahoma. Well, they weren't allowed to go to the University of Oklahoma. They weren't allowed to go to Oklahoma State University. They weren't allowed to go to some of the other colleges here in Oklahoma. And so they created their own, Langston University.
That's a great example.
And just like that, there's so many all over our nation. Langston is the closest HBCU towards the West. There are no colleges past Oklahoma going west. They're all middle belt, middle plains, further on to the east. But there are so many HBCUs, and just for that reason, over the decades, over the centuries, they've lasted because for the students who did not get inside of the PWIs, the students who were not granted access because of skin, because of race, they've come to the HBCUs and have flourished. I'm one of them myself, man.
Mhm. Such a great story, and I absolutely love that. I think there's another connecting point too, which is that in surfacing history like this, what we do is we start to, I hope, build empathy. And I think that's an important legacy of not only Black History Month, but as we're thinking about how do we continue to teach about Black history and teach about all sorts of different experiences that are represented in our communities in this country. Being able to understand different perspectives helps us to understand and have insights and awareness where we might not have before. And so even surfacing the fact that there are such things as historically Black colleges and universities may not be on every student's radar, and helps beg the question, well, why? How did that happen? Why did that happen? And the role that they play. And I think that, again, opens the door for great conversations that can be woven into a lot of different subjects, but again, at the end of the day, builds empathy. So yeah, just wanted to toss that out there.
Yeah, and what I love about it is no matter what college you go to or attend, it's still family. Now, Jackson State University really got on the radar. Now, they were already a very popular HBCU. But when Deion Primetime Sanders got there, he then, once again, we're talking awareness. He brought awareness to HBCUs that others had never, ever been exposed of or ever heard about.
That's right.
And that's what I find so amazing. A few years back, there was a movie with Denzel Washington called The Great Debaters.
That's right.
And once again, it was Harvard versus this HBCU, and it was bringing awareness to all. In our generation growing up, there was a show called Different World.
Oh, yeah.
And on A Different World, they were highlighting a fictitious HBCU called Hillman University. But Hillman was basically like a mosh pot, a gumbo, if you will, of Howard, Langston, Grambling, all of the HBCUs in Atlanta, like Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, all of them put together just to show and to bring awareness to all. I remember looking at a Different World on TV, and I was like, they are using Langston. Well, no, all of the HBCUs are like that. I just didn't know that at the time.
Oh, it's great. And when we think about exposing students to ideas and people and contributions to society from Black Americans, I think there's a couple ways that we can do that. And I'm just going to share my screen real quickly. I'm going to show an example of a workspace within Hāpara that just has a few different layers to it. One is that for those of you that use Workspace, I'd recommend throwing in a little bit of an overview of why. We talk about Black History Month in this particular case. We talk a little bit about exploring different identities here related to that, raising awareness and empathy in doing that. You can drop in all sorts of cool resources. You can see a bunch of different things listed for students here. And then have students do an activity where they're kind of creating their own portrait, doing their own reflection activity. Based off of what they've seen, having a class conversation is really important. And then, of course, helping students be able to know where they are in their workflow. And I just use this as an example of one of several different workspaces that exist already that you can use and tap into for those of you that are already using Hāpara Workspace. And so I think what I'd love to do in closing here, Andre, is there kind of a next step challenge for those that are watching this, regardless of where they are, and they're to the point now where they're thinking, okay, I want to teach Black history during that Black History Month, but now I'm kind of thinking about how I might be able to do this throughout the rest of the year. What are some resources that can be brought into the classroom, either to help a teacher or resources for students that you might want to share?
Yeah, the main thing I would do is do the inner work first, please. Meaning check yourself, meaning do that self-reflection. Look on your social media. How many friends don't look like you on your social media? It could look very rewarding if you were to be like, hey, I want to bring in all of these different people, but you've never, ever built a relationship with them. It will make it look very savory like you're trying to be a superhero. And I don't want that for anybody. I want to build a relationship. Think about some of the friends that are on your social media. Ask them, talk to them, invite them to those conversations first. And then secondly, just being brutally honest here, this goes back to that inner work. We all have biases. We all have some things that we grew up with that could be deemed stereotypical.
Yes.
Check those first before inviting these resources. And I'll give you one small example. I had a friend who she was teaching in the school with me, and she saw how all of the students gravitated towards me because, you know, I was building the relationships. I'm from the hood, like they were from the same neighborhoods. I played basketball and baseball where they played, you know, and she wanted that same connection without the work. And so the way that she did it was she went and bought shoes and shirts and gloves, and she was handing them out like she was Oprah. You know, you shoes. And I'm not talking like inexpensive shoes. I'm talking like at that time Nikes, like real shoes. And the students took the shoes, the parents took the coats, the jackets, you name it. I mean, they took it. But she realized, she quickly asked, like, why am I still not connecting with the students? And during one of our PLCs, it was that rough conversation of, you approached them wrong. You approached them like you were the missionary, like you were the person who's going to save the day. And that's not the case.
That's right.
Today's students, yesterday's students, our parents, our grandparents, we just want to be treated equal. So talk to us like you would talk to me. And she had tears in her eyes, but it was an honest truth and a really strong, great teachable moment where the next week and the week after, she started building relationships with them and just talking to them and finding out who they are and what they like to do and how they love to learn. And she realized that they're just like her son. And it was phenomenal. It was a great thing. So my advice to our educators out there, those who are listening, we want to bring them into our places of business and our schools and our organizations. Yes. The relationship with them first. Get to know them just because you want to get to know them and you want to be their friend. Not because you're going to do me a solid and you're going to talk to my kids who may be a little rough or distractions and you're going to fix it and save that. No. Just talk to them and get to know them because they're dope.
That's right. Oh, what a great way to end. Andre, I really appreciate it. For those of you that don't know, Andre Daughty is an amazing keynote presenter. You probably picked up on the fact that he's an amazing teacher and educator as well. He does a lot of different professional development. I would strongly recommend that you reach out and connect with him. So Andre, where can people reach out and find you if they want to invite you to their school or district, either for PD or to be a keynote at an event?
Yeah, I'm on all the socials at Andre, Andre, Daughty, Daughty, or you can go to my website, andredaughty.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Andre.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate being here.